All right, I'd like to call this meeting of the Delaware Astronomical Society for September 2024 to order. So first thing, do we have any new members that would like to introduce themselves? I think you were.
Yeah, I'm not new, but joined a couple months ago, and I haven't met some of you guys, Ben Frederick. I think I joined 2 or 3 months ago. And I'm more kind of on the astrophotography side of things. So right now I just have a little 71 millimeter quadruplet and use a DSLR and just go where I can to take some good pictures.
Yeah, it's really great. Welcome to the club. And also,
Ben found us a new filming location too. That
I was gonna say, if I could just quick mention that, yes, I'm working on hopefully getting a new relationship with a park up just south of Quarryville, Pennsylvania. It's in Little Britain, Pennsylvania. So yeah, it's some pretty good dark skies up there.
yeah, it's really exciting. Brand new member off to a running start. Fantastic. All right.
Actually, in that vein, I'll make, I always like to put people on the spot. Not really a new member, but I'd like to welcome Andy as you're a newish member, right? Or have we greeted you at a meeting before?
November.
Okay.
Last November.
Well, how about a welcome back? There you go.
Wait, didn't you just join this
Well,
summer?
I'm going to make a special. On the theme of Andy's,
Yeah.
Other Andy, I'm not sure which one is other Andy. But you guys may have seen an email. Andy has actually stepped up to join I guess you could say it's part of my programming committee to be our space news liaison. Andy always has his finger on the pulse of the latest in space news. And so I figured we could all harness that passion, and Andy's going to keep us abreast of space news. You guys probably saw an email from him a day or two ago, and keep your eye open for more of those in the future, and even on the groups.io, and may some of his announcements or notices even spur some good conversation. So want to welcome and thank Andy for taking that on. I was talking with a few folks, and we've had some monumental space things happen that it seemed almost pathetic that we don't even mention it as a astronomy club. So
Yeah, totally great. Well, welcome to the club.
What's that?
Which Andy was that?
That's yeah, Andy. Sorry.
Oh, that one.
Sorry.
Line of sight is
Right.
along here.
Oh, that's
So you're thinking, what have I stepped into? Yeah. Andy, is it Rita? Rokita, sorry. Andy Rokita, it will be doing all of that. Yes.
Yeah, that's important.
Sorry.
Very nice, very nice.
That's you're like, what's going on here?
Yeah, that's true. All right, so next, Bill, do we have anything for the APSIG? We just had a meeting that was very successful, but is there anything coming up?
October 5th, Saturday. Tentatively, probably will be on soon, but it'll all go out over the groups.io.
Wonderful.
On that time.
Very good. And Mary, you want to tell us about the book club?
No, she's muted. Well,
I would think.
Yes, here I am. Can you hear me?
Yes. Oh, good.
Okay. All right, very good. Last September, Tom DeMott recommended that we read The Sirens of Mars by Sarah Stewart Johnson, and we added it to the calendar. And Sarah Stewart Johnson will be joining us for our September book club meeting. Due to scheduling issues with Professor Johnson, she is a teaching professor at Georgetown University. We have postponed the meeting to October 3rd. So please mark your calendars. The September book club meeting is now going to be held at the same time, 7 p.m., but on October 3rd. I discovered in reading the book that this is the 100th anniversary of what was called the Big Listen, the opposition of Mars in 1924. And there were wild efforts made with all of the radio operators collectively brought together to try to communicate with Mars. And there've been some fantastic articles about it recently. And one of the original radios that was used by Todd and Jenkins in The Big Listen is out at the Henry Ford Museum. We've invited the curator of that collection to join us for the meeting. We're still waiting to hear back from her. Because Sarah's father was an avid astronomy magazine reader, we have invited the team at Astronomy Magazine to join us. So one of their senior editors, who's already joined us before, has it penned in on her calendar. So we hope to see some of them at the meeting. The book is The Siren of Mars, Searching for Life on Another World by Sarah Stewart Johnson. And she was one of the Vernon lectures last year. You can go online to the Vernon lecture site and you can listen to Sarah's address there. So again, October 3rd. October 24th, I just want to mention, we are going to be covering the subject of Lenape astronomy. And we have the tribe, the Delaware citizens of the Lenape Indian tribe of Delaware, their chief, his name is Dennis Coker, and members of the Lenape Delaware tribe will be joining us to discuss a paper that's been specifically written for this meeting by Professor Rosalind Frank. And so it's a very unique meeting. Sheila Vincent, who is a DAS member and also with the Delaware Nature Society, will be leading that meeting for us. So if you could include both of those on your calendar for October. Thank you. That's it.
Nice. Thank you very much. Wonderful. Jim Kirshen?
We've had a couple of outreach events recently. One, well, actually two, at the Delaware Museum of Nature and Science. We had one the Saturday before last, where we were just viewing the stars, and we saw, of course, the summer triangle, and we actually saw Saturn come up right before we had to leave. And last Saturday, Scott was telling everyone about what he did at the Delaware Museum of Nature and Science, as far as his he had a planetarium program that he brought with him. But anyway, as far as what we've got going on now, in the near future, I don't think we have anything planned.
Woodside. There's probably one more Woodside event at
Yeah,
least.
that's right.
Yeah.
Bellevue's coming up.
Oh, Bellevue, nice.
Okay.
All right.
But per usual, you know, most of our, well, hopefully all of our outreach is on the club's calendar, so.
Yeah, hopefully.
You have it up there.
Reminders will go out just before.
Yep.
Wonderful. Do we have any other announcements? If not, then we can start the main program. Any others? All right, Jeff, you want to do that?
Cool.
Yep, go for it.
So per usual, first of all, we're kicking off our new season. It is September, and September means we get to hear all kinds of fun adventures about what various club members did over the summer. So we've got 6 or 7 member mini talks on a variety of different subjects. So that'll be rather interesting. What's going to make it especially interesting is I forgot my glasses. So while I have everyone's presentation here, I can't see which one is which. So someone's going to stand up. I'm going to click one, and you just have to present whatever comes up. So, but joking aside, actually, fresh on jet lag, we're going to kick things off with Ryan Gilbert because in his internal clock, it's probably 4 in the morning. So we'll get him earlier. Because when did you land, Ryan?
Yesterday, fresh back.
Nice. And when are we sharing and everything proper, Rob?
You need to share the screen, go back to Zoom and click share.
Guide me.
Big green button. Just click the button.
Oh, okay.
And you want to share the desktop.
Like that?
Yep.
Okie dokie. Ryan, I'll let you know and let me pin this.
Great.
And then I'll do this, and then there we go. Ryan, all yours.
Yeah, so Jeff was right. Yesterday I got back from a 10-day road trip around Iceland, driving around the ring road there that covers the majority of the island, and like definitely fully jet lagged. I should be asleep by now. I'm gonna get through this. If you maybe were paying attention to the email list announcements of maybe what the sun and the KP index has been doing in the last couple of days, and why a trip to Iceland would relate to an astronomy club, like you already know it's coming.
Yeah.
But before we get there, just like an establishing shot in a movie, I'm gonna blow through really quickly some of just a sampler platter of some of the stuff that was there. So it's a big rock, the whole island. So the temperatures were in the high 30s, and the wind was between about 20 to 40 miles an hour on most days, which I am to believe is pretty common for Iceland this month. But there was rain, sleet, and snow, so I experienced all sorts of things there, and it was already snowing on some of the mountain peaks. The thing I saw the most was sheep. I had no idea these little mountain critters, these fluffy things, there's no cliff that they won't go up, or mountain as steep as the slopes can get. Like there will be just sheeps going up vertical. But thousands, millions, uncountable sheeps. This whole island is just filled with sheeps. Really quick, so saw some glaciers, some icebergs. This place is in a park called Diamond Beach, because a glacier meets the ocean here, and glacial ice breaks off and then kind of floats up onto the sand. So it's easy to see why they call it Diamond Beach, because when you get these little scattered glacial bits there, it looks pretty cool. And old little churches, cute churches, dotting the place. They got tons of these things. I think so. Those stones have, they say something in Icelandic on them. I don't know what they say. I think they're from the 1700s though, by looking at the dates on them. And bunches of these cool little houses with the grass on top. Oh, there was a volcano erupting when I was there. It stopped on my second day on the trip. It's inaccessible by car. They just closed the roads, and inaccessible by hiking. So I didn't get to see it, but this is in a different area. This is some like sulfur fumes that are just spewing out of the ground. And it's a popular place to go. There are a whole bunch of us there. It smells like farts. It's just the whole thing is sulfur and fart smell. And as you can imagine, with like 30-mile-an-hour winds, so like these brave souls are in the cloud right now, but you know, the wind shifts a little bit. You could be standing in the clear and suddenly a 30-mile-an-hour like poo gas puff is like coming right at you. So that stuff just sticks in your nostrils for hours afterwards. You can't escape it. And I think, yeah, here we go.
Oh my God.
Wow. So it was cloudy for most of the trip, which is to be perfectly expected. This was about halfway in. I was checking the weather, of course, you know, constantly checking what the sun's up to. And this night was supposed to be cloudy. It was like 95% cloud cover, but this was my first little hint that there was something going on. Just like a little slit in the clouds that opened up. You can tell there were a ton of northern lights going on. This is about all I saw, but that was okay, because on the second to last night and the last night I was there, things all worked out. And I think this is going to be the astronomical portion of the presentation. So this was in a fjord. I'm on one mountain on the side of this fjord, and there's you know, the water there and a mountain on the other side. About Bortle 4 skies and some streetlights and stuff. I would say it's basically like suburbs, not even that remote. But even in you know, semi-light polluted skies, I was surprised and delighted to see that aurora are so bright that they just blast right through that. At least they certainly did when I was there. there's two main colors that the camera, I think this next one will show it. So the green was visible and vivid to the naked eye. The pink, except for a few moments here and there of really bright aurora activity, I did not see the pink with my own eyes. But to give you an indication of the brightness here, I was using about a 2 to 4 second exposure. And if you've done like astrophotography and Milky Way photography and stuff like that, to see the core of the Milky Way and to get that really bright in your photos, you're doing like 8 second, 15 second exposures. It'll depend on your focal length, but just to get that the Milky Way core in there, you know, 10 or 15 seconds is pretty common. But I was doing like 2 second exposures on these auroras, and they were showing up perfectly bright in the camera. So we're talking, you know, somewhere between like 1 to 3 stops, depending on the exact moment, brighter than the Milky Way. So I was delighted at how bright these things were. I can even say most astrophotography, I think, is sort of a lie, right? Like you look through a telescope and it's just this faint gray thing. And then the astrophoto, of course, is just this brilliant rainbow of color. But most of these pictures are relatively close to what I think the naked eye saw. A little enhanced, like, okay, you know, 2 to 4 second exposure. Rob, you have something?
I was gonna say, when the reds and pinks are above the green, they're usually bright enough that you can see them with your eye. When they're below them, they're just usually different. Because it's different chemicals.
Yeah.
When it gets visible this far south, it's gonna be the really bright reds and stuff up at the top. So you could see them.
Yeah, there were a few moments when I did see the pink. Those were, I think, at least on these 2 nights I'm going to show, it seemed to be maybe like 15 to 30 minutes of kind of low activity, followed by like 1 to 2 minutes of incredible activity. So it really paid to like stand out there for a long time. I don't, maybe one of you can help me with this. Like, I understand the pink and the green, those emission lines. I think the yellow it's always on the horizon, and I think it might be looking through several curtains, because like red and green together in an additive color space make yellow. So I think that yellow in the corner is just, we're looking at both pink and green, but I'm not actually sure. So if any of you are aurora experts, talk to me afterwards to explain where yellow comes from in these things. This is just looking straight up. I think that's when it's the coolest of all, because it's like this curtain-y thing that comes down more straight up there. The way it tended to behave, at least on these 2 nights, this is the first and only time I've seen aurora, so I'm not going to pretend to be an expert. It like starts in these little curtains, like these little wavy things, and sometimes it might just be. Oh,
Yeah, what is that?
What happened?
I think the air freshener.
Oh, yeah.
I thought like the computer's overheating.
The smoke coming out of the computer.
Like, you know, one little ribbon, and maybe there will be 2 or 3 or 4, depending. They start like real crisp and bright, and then kind of dissipate over several minutes. So you can start with just one big streak, but then after a few minutes, it could be the whole sky from horizon to horizon just has sort of a green wispiness.
What time of the evening?
This is all probably like 10 p.m. to midnight or so. So that was the second to last night, and this is my last night in Iceland. Again, tons of cute wooden churches. I really like those things. They're just kind of everywhere. And this is, again, it's sort of like a suburbsy place. It's another Bortle 4 sky, so a little bit darker than, you know, Cuba, but I mean, the aurora just shines through perfectly bright. More church there. There's those crisp little ribbons
That's
there.
where you go to heaven, right there.
It's this time.
Oh my gosh, it's reflecting in the water.
Yeah, so I wasn't at a fjord here. This is more like sort of a flat ocean area. And so these couple second exposures were sort of fun because the long exposure here, it was actually getting lit up by the aurora. Like the aurora is sort of maybe the second brightest light source in the image. It's bright enough that the sun had set, but I think we're somewhere in between like civil or maybe nautical twilight here, but like there's, not even fully night. Let's see what's here. So this is what happens when those little ribbons just dissipate. They start real bright and real impressive, and those were some of the more fun moments, but then over 10, 20 minutes, they're still around, but they kind of just seem to dissipate somehow, and like the whole sky would be just all sorts of colors. And again, this was, except for that, this was visible to the naked eye. And yeah, Rob, what's up?
Sorry, I just gotta ask, did you line that ribbon up by chance, or did you walk back and forth until it lined up, or did you take a bunch of photos and just keep it when it lined up?
That's a coincidence. And you mean the sort of
Yeah, I'm
marking of this one here? That's mostly a coincidence. So one thing that maybe sort of surprised, how many of you have seen Aurora?
Oh my God.
It's an astronomy club, so
It's not fair.
I sort of expected that. This was my first time, so I was really excited about it. I was surprised at how fast they moved.
It's fast.
And none of you told me that. Anyone through here?
Tell me that.
So I was getting motion blur in the camera after maybe 4 seconds, maybe even 2 seconds. There was one really fat, like the brightest 30 seconds that I saw the whole trip, where I was using a 0.7 second shutter speed on the camera. And I got motion blur because these things are like flapping like a sheet blowing in the wind. Until they get sort of very far away from you, probably hundreds of miles off on the horizon, and then all you can see is sort of like a slowly like a waving sheet or something like that. But all that is to say, I'm actually answering your question, Rob. I could line stuff up, but I was like running around like a crazy person trying to do that, and by the time I aimed the camera and tightened the tripod ball head, things had changed. So it was just a little bit luck to get anything to line up. I think that's the last one. I don't think I have anything more to say about it.
Did you hear anything?
I didn't hear anything. I listened, but like for this one, there were waves lapping at the shore and things like that. So there was
People do hear noises with the aurora.
Is that the oohs and the ahs of the crowd or?
Sort of a hissing.
Interesting.
Everybody.
Yeah.
Was there other people when you were doing this? Or?
There were several other people. This is actually outside of a guest house where there were probably 15 or 20 people staying, and a good dozen of them were outside. I stayed out later than everyone else. I think most people just stayed out for 10 minutes. I went back in. To me, a night of astronomy is like, that means 3 hours. That means I'm going to be out till 1 a.m. or whatever. So eventually I did have a whole sky to myself. Yeah, but that's about it. So it's not really refined yet. Like Jeff said, I just kind of got back. I still need some editing. If I get anything else good, I'll probably just put it in focus.
Did you do a timeline?
I did. I haven't even seen it. I haven't watched it.
Cool.
I also tried a Star Trail Aurora combination, but real bad. Just the Aurora gets kind of just muddy. It ruined the Star Trail, but yeah, I was just experimenting.
Cool.
Well,
My
Oh,
quick question, several of your scenes were pretty bright in the foreground. Were you lighting things up on purpose or moonlight or what was really making the foreground bright?
Good question, because most of my stuff, like with Milky Way, I am adding supplemental lighting, but for this one, it was like the church. It was just lit by street lights and other local light sources. I didn't do any lighting. For this one, I did change my camera settings to map the church lighting, which actually made the sky a little bit too dim, so I tried to like brighten the sky up a little bit. Yeah, it's just the street lighting of the town. And it's actually, I think, a guest house or an Airbnb. I think someone is like living there for the night. So that's why the lights are on there.
Did the locals like, are they like into that? Like, oh, it's good.
Yep, there it is again.
There, okay.
Here's the American. Or the light. Boring. So the owner of the guest house this night did poke her head. She saw how excited I was, and her and I were just talking about whale meat, rotting fish meat, and puffins for a little while. And at the end, I told her like, "Hey, I'm going to go out and check for northern lights and stuff like that." She poked her head out and seemed impressed for 30 seconds, and then went back in. I guess she's seen it 100 times. I don't know.
Well, your photographs are just stunningly composed. Never mind the aurora. They're just beautiful photographs in their own right. You are amazing as a photographer.
Well, thank you.
I just have to say that. It's just amazing.
I tried my best. I did scope these places out beforehand in the light, which you just have to do.
Yeah.
You just miss things if it's although when it got really bright and like really fast moving, I did kind of lose my mind. There was one time where I think maybe the brightest 60 seconds of aurora that happened on the whole trip. You know how they say like zebra camouflage? It's like they blend into each other, and just a big herd, like a lion doesn't know which one to go after, or it can't really make up its mind. They're like, despite me trying to compose and things like that, there were times when it was like, oh, look at that. No, look at that. Wait, what do I, oh my God. Like not even knowing where to point a camera.
So would you do it again?
I would go somewhere different to do it again. Probably just, I don't think, like, nothing wrong with Iceland. Seemed perfectly fine. People were lovely. I think for the sake of variety, I'd probably want to be in a more natural setting, maybe somewhere even a little more remote. But Iceland was perfectly good, and every place that's in the north is just cloudy. Like Alaska is also famously cloudy. Canada, I don't know. What's Norway up to? It's probably cloudy. Iceland is as good as anywhere else. But that might be my only time there.
Okay.
Too much else on the list, you know?
Well, again,
thanks for fun.
Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah.
And again, special thanks. I appreciate. Ryan and I before this trip were debating whether or not he was ever going to be back in time. So next up, I think, does this say Lancaster? All right. Hang on. Oh no, Scott Jackson. Oh yeah, Scott's up, actually. Sorry.
All of it, Bob. That's cool, man.
Come on up. And actually, because I can't see, I'll let you
Okay.
man the helm. Scott Jackson has 2 mini talks for us.
Okay. So this one's supposed to be a short one. So I spent a lot of time putting together a planetarium program and just mounted on the planetarium. But the message is that I actually used my own laptop to develop it. And that same software that I use is the same software that's on the planetarium, essentially. And it's also on this machine as well. So if you wanted to make your own program for a planetarium, you can do it. And I can talk to me and I'll show you. I figured out or relearned how to do things. So our planetarium, it's really a blessing and a curse.
If you want to drag your window just somewhere that's not blocking your titles,
Sure.
there you go.
Okay, and so it's a very powerful teaching tool. And it's a blessing because you can move across the galaxy in warp drive. And I did this in the presentation that I put on the planetarium at the tour of the solar system. And I go all the way out to the Oort cloud. I mean, if I were to do that in real time, it would take, well, years. And nobody wants to sit in the planetarium for years. But it's a curse because it is complicated to really use it well. And hopefully that will come across in this. And the other curse is that the planetarium really, a good seat in a planetarium, all these back here, you can't really see very well. The ones that are closest to the monitor here are the ones that are best suited. So really it's nominally, I think 25 people, but really you can get 18, maybe 20 in good seats. So what did I do to center? Create a new show, and it's called the Tour of Our Solar System. And we move through the solar system greater than the speed of light. So this is a little clip, and it's only a little piece of going from, well, you'll hear it. So as you keep on going, we're going to move around with you a little bit so we can get to our next target, which happens to be Venus. So there we go, there's the sun. And even though the planets look like they're all in a row, the fact of the matter is Venus is sort of on the other side of the sun. So we have to fly by Mercury and also the sun. The sun will go on right here. And we'll zoom right in on Venus. And it'll take us a while to get there. By the way, we are, of course, traveling greater than the speed of light. And there we go. There's Venus. Great. All right, so that's sort of cute. So that's just a minute. It's about 35-minute presentation, and there's lots of pauses and stuff like that. So how do you program? It's called ATM4, which is a combination of 3 letters in a random number, and I have no idea what that stands for. But on the left here, you can see all these things. These are lines, and these are cues over here. This is time along the top. So each of these lines are actually have different menus that go with them. And in fact, I think I start saying, so a lot of you have used the planetarium and have favorites. Favorites become scenes in here, okay? And then I will pick up pictures and I'll show those pictures, and then I also have to kill the picture. That's what S-kill stands for. And then, of course, you need to make a audio track. If you don't like my voice, you can turn off the audio, and you have to talk though, just to warn you. And it all has to be coordinated. So and there's pauses. There's lots of pauses in there. So there's a lot of supporting programs that go along with there. There's the ATM4 tracks for a given. I'm not certain which one this was because there's actually 13 or 12 sub-programs here. So first of all, a lot of titles I put in and pictures I have to pull out someplace. So I usually take I have to use PowerPoint. Thank you. And I'll use Snagit. So you use Snagit, pick up the thing, and then you drop it into PowerPoint, and then you'll have to adjust the pixel size because it wants to be in powers of 2. And sometimes you take these guys and put it back. Sometimes the titles are actually coming directly out of PowerPoint and use a black background. And then you use a 2 to the N by 2 to the M rule, which means typically I was using 256 by 512. The planetarium likes orders of 2. If you get off of order 2 and not do the right thing, okay? And that's where the slides come in. And then you're using, this is not render box, but the, oh, come on, geez. Yeah, pre-flight. And you're pulling in this case, favorites down into scenes here. And, but then you're also pulling in pauses. There's also a wait button here, and that's coming off a cue for that line as well. And then there's also, oh my God, all these OAs, which stands for orientation animation. And I used a lot of them in this, and that's really how I managed to travel through the solar system pretty well. The audio tracks, actually, I spent most of the time doing the audio tracks, and I didn't write down anything. I just did it ad hoc. So I run through a sub file, and I just talk. And I talked into Audacity. I had a good microphone. This is the actual microphone. And then using Audacity, I can get rid of all the ums and ahs, and I could compress it. And then when I said something wrong, I realized I didn't want to really record everything. I cut out what I said something wrong. I put something back in. And sometimes you can pick up when I did that. But it's a lot. So the bottom line is everything has to be synced very carefully. This actually is just one of the 12. I can't remember which one it is. Oh, this is at Pluto. So this is the Pluto one. Here's, I have a picture of the Kuiper Belt Comet, Pioneer spacecraft, Oort cloud, and there's some credits and blah, 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 blah. And you can see all these slides going on, and here are the audio tracks that are going on. And so I have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 audio tracks, and then a bunch of slides and orientation animations and everything else. The fact of the matter is timing is everything. Timing is super critical. I'd spend maybe an hour trying to make certain everything was going smooth. When you start doing these orientation animations, you also have to sort of wait. And so I'd do an orientation animation, and then I'd pause the program. And meanwhile, I would keep on talking. This audio clip is actually about this long. It's like 3 or 4 feet on the screen, whereas it looks really short. It's not. So I go ahead, do the orientation animation, and wait. And this keeps on talking, even though the actual time is paused. And then you move ahead after that. It works out pretty well. So the main program actually looks pretty simple. It's all the subdirectories. These are all the sub shows for each of the different planets that I was going to. So the organization, another thing that's a big freaking nightmare, because you have to have it all in the right spot. And then you end up packing the show and put it on the real planetarium. And as long as everything is in the right location, it'll pack it correctly and then dump it onto the planetarium. And actually, I was surprised at how well that worked pretty flawlessly. And there's a lot of pictures that I have in there. And then this is so funding for this program is made possible by my pension and Social Security check, and by Mount Cuba Observatory. Okay. So I also put in about, you got to like us on Facebook, otherwise don't post anything, because I fear that I might lose my job. So, be that's me. So that's it in 5 seconds. So cool. If you're interested, you can always talk to me if you ever want to do. You want to go to the next one?
Yeah, well, actually, I'll just make a parting comment. Scott and I are chatting. I'm trying to see if I can finagle a way for Scott to do the planetarium show during one of our meetings. Of course, we'll probably only be able to do maybe half and half, so Scott will run through it twice. So I need to find another program to complement his. But again, I think we'll be able to figure it out.
Can do it on the screen, which is what I did at the Delaware Museum. The problem is that putting something that's projecting up onto a hemisphere onto a flat screen, things look a little funky.
I tell you, we have the resource. It's not ideal, but we should use it.
Yeah, it is a really nice planetarium. The problem is it's actually an orphan system now, because Spitz was bought out, and everybody knew what was going to happen when they got bought out. Sure enough, they've gone away from Sidome, which is what we have. And it's like, good luck. Basically, we aren't going to get any support for the thing.
All right. Next up is Scott Jackson.
Wow. Okay, so what's all the shaking going on? So some of you may know that I'm also an amateur seismologist. So when I retired from DuPont, there's a couple things I wanted to do. I wanted to get more involved with astronomy. And as a kid, I also had built a seismograph. And I can assure you it never worked, okay? But I always had the bug that I always wanted to catch the next big one, okay? And I know I can do that now, okay? But as you'll see, I had it down in my basement, and I was picking up all this noise, and including something that will repeat. My cat was showing up. And this happens to be a trace from here at Mount Cuba, we moved, there's two seismographs, and I'll get to why I have two seismographs. It's now underneath the new dome. It's supposedly quiet. It's like, all right, it's gonna be nice and quiet. I don't have to deal with the cat anymore. You know, it's okay. And that's not quite what happened. I can tell you that. And so there's some mysteries here. But you see this little squiggle. I'll use this since people at home. This squiggle right here is actually an earthquake. Okay. And it's a 3.5 magnitude earthquake up in Perryville, Canada, which is actually up in Quebec. Okay. And you're wondering, how do you know that? Don't worry, I'll get to that shortly. So what's a seismograph? For me, it's called a tilted gate. So here's you can think of this as a gate, and it's actually tilted a little bit. So consequently, it becomes a pendulum, a very long period pendulum. So my two seismographs are just like this, and their periodicity is about 6 seconds. Okay, which, you know, on the order of 10 seconds is about the natural periodicity for earthquakes. Okay, and so that's great. It's called a Lehman seismometer. Okay, and so this is sort of a cute illustration. And you'll see, oh, there's a drum that rolls by, and ink's being put down, and then I think a P wave comes in here. Okay, there's a P wave. Oh, it looks like a red line, and then it shakes, and then an S wave comes there, it shakes even more. And it doesn't bother showing L waves. But you say, oh, so you're going to record on a drum. Well, no. Okay. But here's what they look like. There's two. This is the inside of, there's about a 4-foot diameter steel pipe that sticks up and holds up the weight of the telescope, and it's isolated from the rest of the building. And this is the east-west one. This is the north-south one. And the point is when you use this swinging gate concept, the only motion this can pick up is basically in this direction. The only motion you can pick up is in this direction. This is east-west. This is north-south. So if an earthquake came in a direction from north-south, you might not pick it up from the east-west. So therefore, you want to get two. And you know, the classic way is to record everything on drums. Well, I don't do that. Okay, I have a Raspberry Pi, and this actually shows geophones. I also do have two geophones, but I don't use them because they're not the right frequency. These guys give us the right frequency, and then it's actually connected to our network here. So it's on the network, and I can be anywhere in the world. I can pull down the data off that piece of equipment. It's really pretty nice. So what's happening here is these are weights. So people have been in the DAS for a long time, back when I was president, which is not too many people. These were actually counterweights for my 6-inch telescope. So they're in a coffee can. And I'm thinking, I'd like to have something that has a hole in it so I can put it in this I-beam, this aluminum I-beam. And God, what I have, and I'm looking there, oh, the coffee can counterweights. So I had to cut off the metal because I don't want anything that's ferromagnetic, because there's two rare earth magnets right here that are really powerful. Matter of fact, when I got them, I had to be very careful, because if they slam each other together, you'll never get them apart. Their holding weight is like 150 pounds. So I had to be very careful about setting this up. So these are oak pieces. There's one here and one here on either side of this coil of magnetic wire. And the turns here, I can't remember how many turns, it's about 20,000 turns. When there's motion, when this thing swings back and forth, it induces a slight voltage. It's called EMF, electromotive force. And that goes to the Raspberry Pi. Underneath the Raspberry Pi, underneath this is actually an A to D converter. And that Raspberry Pi then has a program, picks that up, and then it will, in my case, it's recording once 4 times a second. So 4 to 5 times a second, I'm getting data off it. Okay, so pretty cute. And here's sort of the construction. You see a little bit better. Here's the two oak pieces that are holding the rare earth magnets. So the magnetic flux is going this way, and then the copper wire is right in between. There's a slight gap, but they're very, very close. And this looks really strange. It's like, what's going on there? So because this is really a pendulum. If you have a sharp sort of noise come in, an impact in a sense, this would start swinging. It would continue to swing for a very long time. So you need a dampener, okay? So what happens is there's another rare earth magnet underneath this piece of metal. That piece of metal is aluminum. That rare earth magnet's actually inducing currents called eddy currents. I don't know why they call it eddy. Maybe got that name of Eddie came along one time. So it induces eddy currents, and the eddy currents has resistance, and that actually slows down the pendulum. And that's great because you want to have, if you have a instantaneous spike, you want to have it decay very rapidly and not go on for on and on and on. Okay, so that's how that works. And then what's really key is there's 2 points, one, an upper pin and a lower pin. They're virtually frictionless. So these are very sharp metal screws here and here, and they're going against the steel pipe. Everything is really, really tight. And you can see I can actually adjust the periodicity by moving this upper pin out or this lower pin in, okay? So I can adjust where that swinging gate is cocked, and that changes. If it goes down further, it shortens the period. If I get it up closer, then it increases the period, okay?
Scott,
Yes.
what are the advantages and disadvantages of longer or shorter periods?
You want to be at about the natural frequency of an earthquake. So the natural frequency of the earthquake is around 10 seconds. The geophones that I have are at a frequency, well, it's 5 hertz, which is 0.2 seconds. And that's way outside of what a regular earthquake, but they do use geophones. As a matter of fact, the original design for this thing, the Raspberry Pi thing, it's called a Salisbury Pi, if you Google that, used only geophones. And when I saw that, I said, oh, okay, I guess you could do that. But you're outside the natural frequency of most earthquakes, okay? So blah, 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 blah. So one of the things you have to do is you got to calibrate it. So I set it up. So this shows you, this happens to be the east-west one. There's the coil wire and then the rare earth magnets. Here's my camera. And you can see here's the picture of the actual mount for the rare earth magnets. Again, the rare earth magnets are guys that are moving back and forth because they're attached to this boom with a heavy weight. And here's my seismograph. So I got a seismograph going into this coil wire, okay? And this is sort of funny. So this actually shows it. So I disturb it, and you can see this is millivolts coming off the coil, okay? And it's like, wow, that's pretty cool. Sweet. That's the cat. Okay, so there's a cat down there. All right. There's actually a pretty simple setup. So what am I seeing on the seismograph, on the oscilloscope, are these peaks. It's like going back and forth. It's like, what's going on? So what happens is that as these rare earth magnets go past the coil, at the highest velocity, it will give you a high voltage. And then as it sweeps past and goes to the end, then there's no more speed and it goes to zero. So this is at the furthest point of the movement. Down here, you're going in the opposite direction, going across the center of the coil of wire. Okay. So from that, I know exactly what the periodicity, and more importantly, I know based on how much displacement I saw and how much voltage I was getting, I know if I get a certain millivolt signal, I know what the velocity is. And because it's a pendulum, I also know the displacement, okay? Which is really important to have, okay? So here we go. Here's the maximum voltage versus maximum pendulum displacement. So unfortunately, let's get this out of the way. So this is in millivolts. You can see it's going from 0 to 200, and here's the displacement in millimeters. I can assure you most of the earthquakes that I've detected are way down in here, okay? But it's still, I know it's a linear relationship, so we're all good, okay? So what is the data if there's no recording drum? Because at the end of the day, the data you first saw on the first slide looked like you're recording from, and that's done on purpose, okay? So here's the data. So this is coming off the Raspberry Pi. I get a data dump every hour. So this is basically the first hour. This is from midnight to 1 o'clock. That's 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock, 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock, blah, 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 blah. And this is 11 p.m. to noon, which is at 2300. So I grab all 24 hours in a day, and I have to do something with them. And let's see, does this work? Of course not. Oh yeah, so it goes, if you open up one data file, it's almost a megabyte worth of data. There's about 12,000 data points going down. This is the time. These are the two of my seismograph. This is actually a geophone here. And this column, I don't know what it is, and I don't care because I don't need it. So it's lots of numbers, like, oh God. So you say, oh, well, I can play time. This is actually in Julian days. So you have to convert time to minutes since the beginning of this hour. And then you got these two guys here, which is the north, south, and east, west seismographs. Okay, so you plot, it's like, oh, what the hell is this? Look at all this crap. What is going on? There's digital noise coming off the A to D converters. So if you look, when I reduce the data, I actually have to have a separate column over here that actually cuts out all this noise. I have an if then else statement that's about a page long. It's pretty amazing. And that's what it looks like once you remove the digital noise. By the way, this one still had one digital spike here from the ADD converter. So, okay, that's pretty cool, right? By the way, this amount is less than a micron. So that's 1 × 10⁻⁶ meters motion. It's not much at all, okay? So, okay, does it work? Absolutely. Oh, by the way, how do I know there's an earthquake? Well, okay, in principle, if I see something on a seismograph, and I could probably say, oh, there's an earthquake. And a lot of times that does happen. But more importantly, I cheat. So USGS has a service, and they have, you can select how, I usually select 7 days and anything greater than 2.5 magnitude. Actually, for the earthquakes up in New Jersey, I actually went to all magnitudes because some of them were less than 2.5 magnitudes. And I dumped down a file. You can actually go down, put that, throw out a CVS, so comma delimited file. And then I have a separate program, or a separate Excel file where I massage that and I sort it. And I estimate whether I should have seen an earthquake or not. So here's an example. So this is after I've done the massaging. This is the depth of the earthquake. This is the location. This happens to be 2 figures of merit. And I'll get to that. Here's the magnitude. Here's the date. Here's the hour and minutes of when the earthquake occurred, which is not the time you're going to see on the seismograph. More likely, you're going to see a time around here. And you can see some of these things are quite different. I'm trying to think of things. Chile. Well, no, let's go to, Chile's not too bad. So here, this one started at 11:46. And then if I was going to see something, it would have been 12:16. Okay. So that's a half hour later. Okay. So here I pull out 2 sort of interesting things. The figure of merit, that is a big number, 390. There's also another one. That is basically a calculation where I know the distance, I know the latitude and longitude of my location and latitude and longitude of where the earthquake occurred. That's coming off the USGS site. And I can calculate how far away is in kilometers. Okay. I'm told what the magnitude is. That's this number. Okay. All right. And basically, I know if I'm well over 100, I can probably see it. And whoops. And there I get 1164 though. So that's a lot of, that's really big. That's really big. So this happened on Sunday. So when I opened up the data on Monday morning, this like yesterday, it's like, holy shit. And this is what you live for, you know? So this is like the second biggest earthquake I've seen. The biggest one is actually the New Jersey one. And sure enough, this actually shows the 3 different waves. There's a, let's see, is it, yeah, P waves out here, S wave, and then L wave. Most of the time, you're only going to see an L wave, but great stuff. It was really cool. Okay. And this is Mount Cuba. Remember, what the hell's all this stuff? That's noise. Okay. And that's not what I had expected when we got here. Okay. So here's another example. This is in Tonga, which is Southeast Asia, and that's lots of noise. And here's another one. This is New Jersey quake. So there's all this noise going on. This is at my home. They were repaving my driveway. And despite the fact, here is that earthquake. It was a 4.8 magnitude at 1024, which is exactly where I saw it, because the time difference is we're hardly any far away at all. And there's another one, second one that occurred down here as well. Sort of cool. And that's feeding the cat right there. Right? And here's another one. And there's feeding a cat again. It's like, oh God. And so you can actually, I can back out what I think the magnitude should be versus what USGS is saying. And actually, I do get a pretty good relationship. All right. So the thing's calibrated is what that's saying. And so here's an example of, this is at my home. It's like, okay, there's feeding the cat, and then there's all this noise. And it's because the neighbors were digging up their backyard. They're resodding it. Okay. But you notice that all this noise, and it stops. What is going on? Why did they stop? And then you look at the time. It's 12 noon. They took lunch. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. So this is Mount Cuba, and this is Mount Cuba. It's getting pretty bad. So what's causing that kind of shaking? It's consistently from roughly 1 a.m. to between 9 and 11 a.m. And it looks like this all the time. It's really bad. And so I did call the water department, talk to them, and they called me back 2 weeks later, and they said it's not the Hoops Reservoir, because that's David had suggested that, and that seemed reasonable. And then they said, oh, it might be a grinder pump for taking care of sewage and pumping sewage out, except everybody around here is on septic. And then when I was talking to the water department, they said, oh, well, you know that the Country House Retirement Community, which is right here up on 52, which we're actually pretty close to, believe it or not, they have a reservoir, and they always pump it full from 1 a.m. to about 9 a.m. It's like, oh, geez. So I think that's what it is. I don't have confirmation, but I gotta believe it probably is. But I'll tell you, with this much noise, I'm at this point in time, I'm planning on moving back to my home and still feeding my cat. Okay. Any questions? Thank you, Scott. Thank you. Welcome. Yeah, right. Oh, yes, it could be angles. That's right.
Rob Lancaster is now going to share a trip he took.
Very good. So I'm going to talk about everything I did this summer, but it's not going to be that long. I'm going to make sure it's pretty quick. So this photo that you see right here is from Yosemite National Park, and I'll talk a little more about that very shortly. So here, these were photos from our trip to California. You can see there's me and my wife in Yosemite with the waterfall and a lovely rainbow. And here's kind of the iconic kind of shots that I took from the so-called photo spots at Yosemite, so you could see what it looked like. So we actually did a few things out there in California. We spent about 3 weeks there. We started by flying into San Francisco and spent one night there because travel time, and we had to stay overnight and drive like 3 hours over to Yosemite National Park. So we did stay one night there and then traveled over there to Yosemite Valley. We spent about 12 days, almost 2 weeks in Yosemite and its vicinity. One of those days we did go down to Sequoia and then came back, but we spent most of the time in Yosemite. And then after we finished there, we came over here because I had a summer institute to attend for my school. And we did a couple of things in the local area there, which were really fun as well. So we can talk about it. So here's the Yosemite area and what we did in that area. We stayed actually outside the park, but not where most people would. So many people stay south of the park and then try to go in that south entrance. And you have like a 3-hour wait to get into the park. And then there's about an hour's drive to get through the park to even get to the valley. So that's not what we did at all. I found a hotel right here, pretty close to El Portal. It's a very tiny little community, but there's a road that goes up here and goes into Yosemite Park up the Merced River, and it goes through this really lovely rock archway. It's called, I think, Gateway Arch or something like that. I don't remember what it was called, but we went into Yosemite Valley there a number of times during this trip, and we went in all hours of the day. And the longest we waited was an hour, and that was one time. The rest of the time it was 20 minutes or less. And it was really nice because 20 minutes into Yosemite Valley, actually, because we were right there, we could like leave at 10 p.m. and just kind of drive down the hill to get to our hotel. And so we would stay oftentimes, eat in the restaurants, kind of closing them down, because we sometimes would be kind of late when we were getting back. And we'd wander into the park whenever we felt like it. Like some days we got up at the crack of dawn, but other days it was about 12, maybe 1 when we finally got in there. But a really important thing that we did was we didn't spend a lot of time during the day down here in the valley. So most of our days were spent around here in the surrounding areas doing hikes and stuff like that. Because I'll tell you a secret, Yosemite Valley is packed in the middle of the day. But after 4 p.m., everybody goes back because they got like 2-3 hours to drive. So we would spend sometimes from 4 p.m., sometimes later, depending if we got back from hiking. But we spend the evenings just hanging out in Yosemite Valley. There's nobody there. You drive around with the windows down, the roof. It's so nice. So it was very pleasant, I will say. So we did do a number of different activities in these areas. Did a bunch of stuff around Yosemite Valley. These groves up here are giant sequoia trees. And down here, this other grove of Mariposa Grove, that's also giant sequoia trees. So we saw a number of giant sequoias in Yosemite. Of course, we went to Sequoia National Park, but I actually enjoyed these more because there was nobody there. We could walk around, we were all by ourselves, and we had a very lovely hike. It was very nice. We did spend one day up in Hetch Hetchy. It's often a forgotten part of Yosemite Valley. If they hadn't filled it with water, it would be a valley almost as beautiful as Yosemite itself. Unfortunately, it is full of water, so San Francisco can have, their drinking water. And they have some of the best drinking water in the country because of it. But, it was also a lovely thing to visit too. I can't pronounce this very well. I think it's Tuolumne. I can't pronounce that word. I've tried many times. But we went up there as well, did some hikes in that area. Again, there was like nobody there. So everybody goes into the park. They literally drive up this road. They go to the Mariposa Grove usually to see Old Grizzly. They walk in a little loop and they go back. But there's a whole section of giant sequoias that they don't even see. And there's some great hiking trails up around this that they don't look at. And then they go here to the valley, they look at a bunch of waterfalls, and then they go home. So if you know what they do, you can have a much better trip, in my opinion. This is the hotel we stayed at. It doesn't look like much, but it was actually a very nice hotel. It had several pools. It had 3 pools, several hot tubs. It had a breakfast place and dinner place right next to it over here. They had their own little private beach and park-like area right by the river where you could wade in the water. So it was very nice. And the hotel was very well kept. We had no issues the whole time we were there. It was very nice. Fairly inexpensive too. The first thing that we did when we got there, we checked into the hotel and went to bed for the night because we were going to get up at like 3 in the morning because we were going to hike up Half Dome. I did do some training before I did this. I did a lot of walking around at work during the day, did a lot of hiking in the local area to get ready for this because it was a crazy hike. To do the Half Dome hike, you start over here in Yosemite Valley. There's a trailhead where you have to park. You do have to get a permit to do this because it's a very popular hike and they don't want too many people going up the cables, which is what I'm going to show you in a couple moments. It's a hazardous part where you don't want too many people on the ladders at the same time. So they do limit people on those cables. So if you do want to do Half Dome, just be warned, you need a permit for the last part. So you start here in the little parking area. There's several waterfalls that you walk past. You can go up this mist trail, goes past Vernal Falls. You're basically walking under the waterfall. It's absolutely beautiful. So I love this part of the hike. So that was great. And then you get up here into the Little Yosemite Valley. And that again is a part of the park where very few people are because they don't want to hike that high. It's pretty far. So it was a lovely valley without too many people. And I enjoyed walking there as well. But after all that hiking, we still had to go all the way up here. It was another several thousand feet. Overall, it was like 8,000 feet of elevation gain. That's crazy. And it was about 7 miles up. And once you get up there, 7 miles back, all the way back. We started at the crack of dawn. We didn't get back till 8 p.m. And we almost didn't get dinner in the restaurant because it was closing. They let us in, but we almost didn't. Yeah, so that was interesting. I would say this part was really great, and it was fun to be on the very top, and I did enjoy the Little Yosemite Valley. But everything from here to here, I was just exhausted. I think I'm still there saying, when is this going to end? Because this part was great. That was just too much. It was a lot. But when you get up there, it is pretty amazing. This last little bit is the cables I was talking about. So you have like little platforms of wood that go across in between these metal bars that stick up, kind of like a handrail, with cables going between those things. Those little wooden things are really important though. It was really helpful when you're trying to get up there. You don't need climbing harnesses or anything like that, but you have to hold on because, you know, it is dangerous, right? It's about, I think, 400 feet, if I remember correctly, for that last stretch. But yeah, so you do have to be careful on that part.
Is that where the woman died when it rained? Okay.
People have, yeah, it happens every year. So you definitely have to be careful on that last stretch. And I was tired at that point, but I did manage to make it up there. And we did spend some time up there, got some great views of the valley and the surrounding countryside. It was very nice. So I do have some other photos from other places we visited in Yosemite Valley. This is Taft Point. So my wife is standing here, taking a photo of me way over there. And you can see the valley down here. It's about 4,000 feet down, 3,000 to 4,000 feet down to the bottom. And it's a lovely view. And you can see this is looking back toward our hotel. Our hotel's back there in that valley.
I see it.
Yeah, you can see it. This is up in Tuolumne. It's a lovely dome that we climbed on that was up there. Again, nobody was there. It was awesome. There were a bunch of people here, so this was kind of crowded. There was nobody up there. So definitely there's some great places to visit. It's a huge park and the crowds all go to the same places. Here's some other photos around the area. This I think was Mirror Lake, if I remember correctly. This was another view up at that dome. I think it was called Lempert Dome, if I remember right. This one was Sentinel Dome. Yeah, I remember that now. And here's Dog Lake. That was up in Tuolumne as well. Don't remember where exactly that one was. I think that one was at the popular Vista spot near the entrance. Oops, sorry. Trying to get to that one. All right, so here we have a number of giant sequoia trees. One problem is that you don't really have that much of a sense of scale here. These things are enormous. They are the biggest trees you'll see. One thing that might help, there's my wife, here's the tree, right? So I figured I'd throw that one in there for a sense of scale. And I mean, this is a decently wide road, so the tree is the size of the road. You could fit 2 cars here, probably. Yeah, that's a big tree.
Is that a tree that might have been on fire at one point?
So all of the giant sequoias are very resistant to fire, and they actually rely on fire in order to reproduce. If a giant sequoia loses if a giant sequoia has seeds and like cones that go on the ground, it needs fire in order for them to germinate. And it actually relies on the other trees in the forest dying in the fire so that it can continue to live. If you fight the fires and don't let them spread, then the giant sequoias suffer because they get crowded out. So they actually benefit from the fires. But yeah, most of the giant sequoias do have burn marks on them and they are fine because they can take that. Here's a lovely lake that we passed on the road on the way to one of these places. Just happened to be sunset, and again, we barely made it to dinner that night. But we did have very nice dinners every night, because the various restaurants in the valley are open till 8 or 9 or 10. You just have to know their schedules before you go on your hikes. So you make sure you make it back in time for dinner. So these photos here I took at tunnel view. You can see this was lit by tail lights to give a nice light painting effect with the sky in the background. And this is taken at that vista point that I showed you earlier, where we had the photos in the daytime. There actually is a creek right here. I was trying to get it in a shot, but it really didn't work with the lens that I had with me. So that didn't work out. One thing that happened close to when this shot was taken is my camera actually fell over and almost fell in the water, but I did catch it and continued. These little things here on the side of El Capitan, those are climbers and they're little camps, which is kind of cool. And you can see the light painting effects from the various vehicles as they're driving around in the valley. This is a stack. I don't remember how many. I know one of these stacks was like 21 images and one was like 15 images. So I think you'll see both of those. This, of course, is the Milky Way. This is in the region of Cygnus, the Swan, over there. And here's more towards Sagittarius. Unfortunately, the valley is oriented east-west. So you're gonna lose the south, right? Because it's blocked by the cliff face. So we do have a decent view of this part, but we missed that. You have to go up to Glacier Point or somewhere else where you can get a decent southern view in order to get that part of the Milky Way. So the latter part of our trip, it won't be too long. The latter part of our trip, we headed out to San Rafael, to my summer institute. We saw the Muir Woods, which was absolutely beautiful redwoods. It was lovely hiking. And we saw the Frank Lloyd Wright building. Here's where our hotel was. It was right next to the Frank Lloyd Wright building. We saw it every day. And we actually went to the fair there and climbed up San Pedro Mountain. And it was a lovely time.
Hey, Ron.
Yep.
What was that, the Marin County Civic Center?
Yes, it was.
Oh, yeah.
It was indeed.
Beautiful building.
Yep. It was very cool.
They filmed a couple.
Yeah, we
movies
spent a
there.
bunch of time in the little park. Again, we went to the fair there in the little park. And we saw the building, but we didn't get to go inside. So here's the San Francisco area. We spent like one day there. It was freaking cold. We walked across the Golden Gate Bridge. I thought I was gonna die. It was freezing. It was like 50 degrees. And I mean, I had 2 coats on and it was not enough because the wind was howling. We did a nice hike here on the Presidio on the Pacific Ocean. That was very nice. And we ate at the Bubba Grump Shrimp Company, which was pretty cool. And there's supposed to be sea lions there, but they weren't there. So we didn't see that. So the other thing I did later this summer was I spent a bunch of time improving my astronomy gear. I sorted it, I replaced a bunch of lost thumb screws, and I put things in boxes, tried to organize a lot. I also got this little camera so I could monitor my scope in the driveway, and it doubles as a weather cam because I can see the sky as well as the scope to make sure that nobody's bothering it, it's still working okay, but I can also see if clouds are coming. And it pans with the controls on the phone and goes up and down, and you can zoom all around. It doesn't have the zoom feature, but you can go around in the sky, I should say. And it was $30. So definitely worth getting. Yeah. And then I built a new battery box. It's a lithium iron phosphate battery. You can see it right there. It has a plywood base that I made, stainless steel case. I can monitor it by my phone with a Bluetooth app, 2 Anderson power pole outlets, 1 cigarette port outlet, switch to turn it off, and fuses for safety. I made new cabinets for my 10-inch telescope I got 2 Christmases ago. As you could see, the series of pictures in my construction of that. I improved my twilight mount. I worked with Greg Lee. He gave me a bunch of help with that. And I drilled some new holes to make it a little stiffer. I built this little plywood reinforcement here. And I decided to replace the little screw on the bottom to make it easier to fold up. And then I got a new saddle that would be more stiff. I improved my solar imaging scope by getting a new motor here, by making some tube rings. I 3D carved them. And I actually made this solar finder thing on my lathe. And I'll have to show that at some point. It's pretty cool. Took a bunch of images of the sun after I did all this work. So that was pretty cool. There's a few more. We had great solar activity, so that was a lot of fun. I improved my 10-inch scope. I added these little focus extenders that are AP-SIG. Some people made a suggestion that I should do that. I actually have recently done that. Got a nice new ADM saddle to hold my scope better. And I got this little dovetail, little saddle and mount attached to my various scopes. So I can take the Raspberry Pi and all the gear and just swap it between scopes. And that led to all these pictures, which I did at the end of the summer. And that's it.
Cool. Good job. Jeff Miller. Jeff is gonna talk about some film experiments that he was doing with his Sea Star. And just a little pitch while he's getting in position, just a little pitch. As a reminder, this is Jeff's personal Sea Star, but the club does own one as a loaner scope that members can borrow. Jeff, take it away.
So,
And let's keep it moving.
okay.
Yeah.
All right, so it won't take very long. This started really back in June at the monthly meeting when Mary mentioned that the book club was going to have a discussion on the 27th of a book called The Day We Found the Universe by Marcia Bertucci. Anyway, I couldn't get to the meeting and I borrowed the book out of the library. And on page 29, I noticed this beautiful picture of M51 taken with what the talk is about, the Crossley reflector.
Jeff, I'm gonna turn the lights on.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
So I thought, this looks very familiar because that's the one I took with my Sea Star. And my Sea Star is, a 50mm aperture and 20 inches tall. And the Crossley was a state-of-the-art reflector that I'll get to in a second, 36-inch. So I thought, okay, I'll just take a little better look at this. And it turns out the Crossley reflector was made in 1879 in England, sold to a man named Edward Crossley, Esquire, in Halifax, who had discovered that the weather really didn't suit using a 36-inch reflector in his location of England because it was cloudy and rainy all the time. So the director of the Lick Observatory outside San Francisco convinced him to donate it to the Lick Observatory in 1898. And they packed it up and shipped it from England, including the dome, okay, that it was housed in. And then in June of 1898, Edward Keeler took over as director of the Lick Observatory. And he held that post until August 12th, 1900, when he suffered a stroke and died at 42. But he took it upon himself to make improvements to this telescope. And this is worth pointing out that he started a program to observe 104 objects. And he got through about 65 or 70 before he died. And his other astronomers then finished that off between then and 1908. And there were two major discoveries that he started that was finished with this work. And one was the number of known nebula, right? Because at that time, galaxies were still nebula, part of the Milky Way, was increased from about 13,000 to over 120,000. So that was a major discovery over that 6 or 7 years, 8 years. And they discovered also, they noticed that most of these were spiral. So these were at the time major discoveries. So the reference, we're gonna move this. The reference is from a book which you can either buy, which I did for like a whole $5 off of Amazon, or you can go to the Gutenberg Project on Google and see this entire book. And you'll see some images I pulled out of it, out of the Gutenberg reference. Anyway, this is the photographs of nebula and clusters made with the Crossley reflector, Lick Observatory publications in 1908. So, all right, so this is the Crossley reflector. Everybody's seen a Sea Star at this point. That thing is like 4 stories tall. My Sea Star is shorter than this, right? All right, and so here is M51 again. the pictures I just showed you. I've turned mine a little bit and I've cropped it to make it roughly the same size that I could get out of the Gutenberg project picture. So the Crossley picture on the left, taken in May of 1900, was a 4-hour exposure where Keeler was sitting in the observing chair with a crosshair on the guide star and moving the telescope with the electric motor a little bit every few seconds for 4 hours without leaving. Okay, and that's a 3.3-fold enlargement. This is my C star on the right, taken 124 years later, 16-minute exposure, and I've cropped it a little bit. All right. So what about other things? All right, here's his picture taken November 16th, 1898 of M42, the Orion Nebula. Now I didn't actually turn, well, mine's turned. They're close enough to, I don't think they lined up exactly, but they're pretty close. Anyway, that's a 2-fold enlargement. Now remember that on his 36-inch reflector telescope, they've got mounted for the photographic plates are only 3¼ by 4¼ inches. And of course, he doesn't have any color, right? And so the C star taken 125 years later, essentially, is a 20-minute exposure. And, you know, at the time, I think that I did that in February when I first got the telescope. I kind of like picked a 20-minute exposure, and I'm still trying to figure out what the right exposure times are. It's going to be dependent on the lighting conditions and the object. So, all right, I've just got a few more. Here's the Hercules poster. Here's the Crossley, again, June 22nd, 1900, 2 hours. I mean, everybody goes, if other people, if you take a picture of a globular cluster, you don't need 2 hours, right? So in fact, I think mine is 10-minute exposure. And the Crossley is a 3.8-fold enlargement. This is no enlargement at all. All right, M101, the Pinwheel Galaxy, June 8th, 1900, 4 hours again, 3-fold enlargement. I've got 130 minutes, so just over 2 hours. I cropped it and rotated it and made it roughly the same size, but other than that, and I've got coloring. And I just want to point out that back to my comment about how long to expose, my niece's husband has a C star, and he took the same picture, but only for 32 minutes back in July. So again, it takes longer than you think with the C star. You just have to be patient with it. The good news is I can sit inside, either in the air conditioning or where it's warm, depending on the time of year, and monitor the images as it's coming up in real time on either my iPad or my iPhone or computer if you felt like it. So, and more recently, here's the Dumbbell Nebula. I mean, his exposure is cool. I mean, this is 3 hours he sat there to get this image. And again, this is a 3.8-fold enlargement. This is 30 minutes and then cropped to match its size. And finally, the Andromeda Galaxy. Here's his picture from September 7th, 1898. Again, 3 hours, right? And here's a 90-minute exposure while I was sitting in the air conditioning in August. All right, so 2 more little points from Bartusiak's book. One is her comment that Keeler was generating the Hubble telescope pictures of his time with that telescope. There wasn't anything to match it in 1898, 1900. And then there's a book by Osterbrock about Keeler, and his comment, this was in 1984, his comment was basically, we know these pictures that's so well that it's hard for us to realize how sensational these images were to astronomers of his day. And finally, I'll leave you back in Yosemite, Bob, with the most important question, which is why do bears speak? All right, that's it.
Cool. Thank you, Jeff.
Next up, we have Jim. Oops.
Okay. Oh, I should point out that in the focus, we go back to M51 for a second. If you look at Bill's picture of M51, what a, a really, the telescope by comparison, it's absolutely gorgeous. So C-Star can't do that, but the C-Star can do a lot of quick things and get some very nice images. Sorry.
Okay, I want to tell you about the International Library Telescope Program that we have started here at the DAS. And what I did during my summer vacation may not sound like much of a vacation, but anyway, let's see, what's it going?
Spacebar should work.
Spacebar. Okay. What this whole thing is, the International Library Telescope Program, it's a library telescope program that places telescopes in local public libraries instead of just schools, allowing for greater general access to the scope, since they can be put into circulation just like a book. It's kept in their library of things, their new library of things in the libraries, and they just check them out. You go in, you're a patron, you just sign up and check them out, and you take them home. Where applicable, a local group member acts as a foster parent or a shepherd to the scope, and he or she will periodically clean and adjust the telescope and act as a local astronomical resource to the patrons. And theoretically, you could possibly have a student, a library member, someone who's knowledgeable with telescopes and the such to be engaged as an apprentice astronomer to provide the needed care for the telescope. Let's see, the Library Telescope Program was launched in 2008 by the New Hampshire Astronomical Society, and public libraries and science organizations from around the world are adopting the program. It's, like I said, been in operation for 16 years, currently operating in 8 countries, mostly in the United States, but a lot in Europe, and in Western Europe. It has 1,041 library outlets it's operating in, and it has 6,700 plus Facebook followers, if that means anything. So the way that we got started is that Mary Webb, she's the Delaware Astronomical Society librarian, proposed in 2023 that the DAS seek funding for the purchase of 36 Orion Star Blast telescopes for each of the public library systems in the state of Delaware. And so Mary, along with Serena Deglin, and she's a Delaware administrative librarian, and Ann Killer Clark, she's the Delaware Director of Libraries and Information Services, sought and obtained funding for these 36 telescopes and Zoom Celestron Zoom eyepieces from the Crystal Trust. Now, for those of you who don't know what the Crystal Trust is, it was created in 1947 by the late Aaron A. DuPont as a partial expression of his extensive interest in philanthropy. So they obtained the funding, and 36 of these telescopes here were ordered in April of 2024 and were delivered in one fell swoop in May of 2024. And that, frankly, that just surprised the hell out of me, because I expected these things to arrive in dribs and drabs. But no, they just all showed up at the Delaware Public Archives building in Dover, and one day in May. From the beginning of June 2024 through August of 2024, a group of DAS volunteers met every Tuesday night at Mount Cuba, right here in this room, to retrofit and personalize the telescopes for lending throughout the Delaware library system. Now, as far as having these things retrofitted, I'll show you what that means. But each one of these libraries, library telescopes, is given the name of a Delaware astronomer. And there didn't seem to be too many that we could find to begin with, but actually, the more research Mary did, the more and more of these Delaware astronomers, from the 1620s, and the Lenape Indians, they started to come out of the woodwork, and we were able to find 36 names, plus probably a lot more, to name these telescopes to give a little added flavor to their to the library concept. So what we did to make these things more user-friendly, less fiddle-aroundable, we drilled, we drilled and installed a moon port. Here's the dust cover. Here's the moon port for when you're, of course, viewing the moon when it's full or 3/4, so that you don't get overloaded with the light. We had to, of course, modify sometimes, most of the time, modify the outsides of these things so that they actually kind of like were tight, so that they didn't fall out. That was a manufacturing problem. A lot of these things were pretty loose. We attached the connecting strings right here. These were nylon strings that we attached so that these things wouldn't get lost. The moon ports and the dust covers wouldn't get lost. Heavy duty wood screws in the base, because the screws in the base were not long enough, didn't grab the wood well enough, so that these things, these bases would break. We replaced the knurled knobs of the eyepiece holders and the finder scope, so that they couldn't be fooled with, taken off, etc. by the patrons. Okay, we installed a Celestron zoom eyepiece, and that's this thing right here. We had, because of another manufacturing issue with the Celestron zoom eyepiece, we had to tape the eyepiece cushion on with some electrical tape, because it kind of like kept falling off. Let's see. Okay, and we added a lot of decals for safety and attribution. The Delaware astronomers, and attached a moon map, and where you could find more help online, and etc. That was what we did on the front of the scope. This is what we did in the back of the scope. Here's what you see. There were knurled knobs here for the collimation screws. We removed those and we replaced them with 4mm washers and number 6-40 self-locking nuts. We collimate the secondary and primary mirror, align the finder scope with the telescope, and we would place the telescope operating manual along with a. Okay, here it is. Here's the operating manual, user guide for the telescope. We would laminate those pages. We placed in a National Audubon Society pocket guide to constellations. We throw in some DAS cards and a red flashlight. So that was all part of the stuff that was included in this fanny pack. That's a waste pack. So that was that, and I think that was all the changes that we made on this thing. And so Robert Stack was the team leader for the mod squad, so to speak. But Greg Lee and Sydney and Tom and Christy Lapp, Tiger Cosmos, and myself, we basically converted these 36 telescopes in the same manner, in the same way. And we got pretty good at it after a while. Actually, it took us about 2 hours to do all the modifications on one of these things once we got really good at it. So that's what we did. And that is that.
Thank you, Jim.
And all of the telescopes have been delivered to their libraries. Wow. Awesome. I'm going to put
Thanks, Jim.
away.
Somebody got a question.
All right,
I'm going to sit and be late.
no problem.
So.
So again, Andy, again, we welcomed him as a new member, no pressure. New members are not obligated to give a talk on their first meeting, but we certainly appreciate Andy giving us this one.
This is sort of my second meeting because,
Yeah.
like I said, my family and I moved here in 2023 in the summer, and I've been shuttling back and forth between here and Eugene, Oregon, for medical reasons and work reasons, one of which helped cause the other. But I have spent the last 8 years, or the previous 8 years, in the Eugene Astronomical Society, 5 of which I was the president, because I didn't know any better and didn't learn from my previous stop in Southern Illinois, where I was president of the astronomy club for 9 years. So no, I'm off the table. So don't ask me for
Rob, you're safe.
for that. Yeah, I'm done. I'm going back to just being an observer. And so what I have spent the last 2 summers doing is identifying and observing all of the little tiny galaxies that live along the summer Milky Way. So I started this project in 2023, kind of on the spur of, on a whim, really, on the spur of a moment, observing in lovely places with Bortle 2 and Bortle 3 zones, which tend to abound all over Oregon. Once you get out of the Willamette Valley here, this is the city of Portland right here, and Eugene, where we lived, and we had observing sites in these places here, dark blue zones, gray zones, is Oregon Star Party here. So this is about halfway across the state. Of course, here's the coast, and the light pollution falls off not really quite quickly enough once you get off land. But was very fortunate enough to have 8 years under skies that ranged from about 21.78 to 21.5 on a sky quality meter. So that's naked eye magnitudes close to 7 at the best of times. And we spent a great many hours observing in places that look like this up on the side of a mountain. This was our favorite observing site, Linslaw Point. This is a panorama of the site. This crag, which will come up later on, I think, blocked most of the light pollution, but this also happened to block part of the northeast part of the sky, which we never bothered to observe in anyway, so we never really worried about it. Our view to the south was down in this area. Actually, no, it's over here. So you had a view down not too south because you're at 44 degrees latitude, and the marine layer, because we were about 45 minutes from the ocean, tended to block the southern horizon quite a bit, transparency wise, but you could get down to about magnitude 6 or so naked eye down in lower Sagittarius from these sites. And I not only had this site, but I had another site that was very much the same. This is a road running back along here. This is the pull off on the side of the road. Again, the view to the north was blocked. We lost Comet Neowise there very quickly and didn't get to see it again from this site. And this site also came with a group of very disreputable ruffian astronomers that you can see here, part of the regular observing group. Ruffian astronomers, yes. The kind of people that you don't really want to hang around with at night, but you do anyway.
So are you one of those, or were you taking the picture?
I was not taking the picture. I was actually the guy over here.
Oh, you're a ruffian.
Yeah, I'm one of the ruffians. The real ruffian was the guy taking the picture with his giant 12-inch binocular telescope here, who writes for Sky and Telescope every month. And of course, the lovely drawback of observing in this area, yeah, you get great skies, but then, you know, the surrounding forest starts catching fire, and it's, you know, load all your precious things into the van and hope you don't have to bug out at the last minute. This was from the back of my house during the summer of 2020, because, you know, 2020 was such a marvelous year. Why not throw in some forest fires to go along with it and have everybody jumping every time a doorbell rang or something. But I did spend the majority of this time, the last 2 summers, observing along the plane of the summer Milky Way, specifically here in and around the confines of the summer triangle. Because what you do is visual observation, and only visual observation because you're completely technologically disinclined and incompetent, you wind up looking for bigger and stranger things to observe. And so I hit upon an idea of observing the galaxies closest to the summer triangle in and around the summer triangle along the plane of the Milky Way. Obviously, a lot of these are just outside of the triangle, but this was my summer haul, of which I did most of the observing in 2023 and went back to go to work and did some touching up on some of these to make sure I had them all for a very good reason. These are basically what I was picking up. These are galaxies in the 14th, 15th, 16th magnitude range. Some of which didn't even have PGC numbers. They had LEDA numbers and 2MASS-X catalog numbers. And the principal reason for doing this is not only for the astronomy blog that I've been writing 10 years as of this month. Actually, not last month, by now. I've done over 1.1 million words in the 10 years of that. I don't know if we can look up to it here. Oh, no, we won't bother. But the other reason for doing this is that it's the foundation.
Send the link to the groups.io.
Okay, yeah, the Unfrozen Caveman Astronomer is my astronomy blog. It's been going for 10 years. Gets very detailed. My notes tend to get pretty extensive on a little tiny blur of a galaxy. I can, do 250 words or so. I told myself I wasn't good enough to sketch things, but I would make sure my notes were good enough that somebody else could do it based on what I wrote. And I've put that to the test a couple of times. That works pretty well. But the main reason for doing this is that this is the basis of an article that I have coming out in Sky and Telescope in August of 2025 on this very subject of these little galaxies and the numbers of them that can be seen in the summer triangle. And that was my other project for the summer, was getting the first draft written and submitted. So, yeah. So I believe that's all I have.
That's awesome.
Are you on our groups.io?
Yes, I am.
Okay, cool.
I am.
Yeah, send a link.
Okay.
Shameless self-promotion is
Same-
always welcome.
I'll take all the full promotion.
Thank you, Andy.
Yeah.
Next up.
Mine is real
Oops, I keep hitting the wrong button. Dave Grosky, Spica.
Yes, thank you. So what did I do this summer? So one of the things, I've got a sea star and I love my sea star, and sea stars can do wonderful things. And back in April, I took it and took a video of the eclipse. I've been taking pictures with it. I really enjoy it, but you also can do a little bit of science with it if you want to too. So one of the things that happened this summer was back in July, Spica got occulted by the moon. So what's an occultation? Occultation is when one astronomical body passes in front of the other. Most of the time it's the moon, and you can actually do some science with this, and it's been used before to do a lot of other things. And like you said, you can refine the profile of the moon, you can get a better idea of the the orbit of the moon. This was used for the Apollo missions. Al Weber, who was member here for many years, was part of doing occultations for this reason. You can determine, some diameters of stars. You can identify binary stars that are spectroscopic. Is one, with one blinks out, you can still see the other one. So there's a lot of other things. Like I said, there's a lot of things you can do with occultations. Like one of the other things too is like the rings of Uranus were first observed from an occultation of a star going by the planet, and it blinked out before it should have, and they said, okay, that's because of those rings. So like I said, there's a lot of things you can do with this. So I've observed occultations before, and why is this not advancing?
Because you moved the, just click, and then you should be able to use the space bar. Click anywhere in the empty space. There
Okay,
you go.
so Spica is a bright star in the constellation of Virgo. And I don't know if we got to turn down the lights even more, but you can see there's good old Spica, and here's the side of the moon, the dark side of the moon. Let me just turn the lights down even more. Turn them all the way on. Can you see that? Anyway, so I use my sea star to actually, follow this and watch it disappear. So I'm going to click out of this, and hopefully I can, Jeff, if you can help me here, get to that.
Baby.
Get to the movie real quick, and I'll show the movie.
Yeah,
So let me just turn this up for a second so you can see.
thank you. Movie is, I think it's this one.
Yeah, that's that
Yeah.
one, so that should play.
And I'll let you.
Yeah, so let's just.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so one of the nice things about a sea star, the moon was really low at the time, okay? And in a telescope, I had a telescope, I couldn't see the dark side of the moon, but the sea star could see it. So here you have Spica just, getting really, really, really close.
Because you had the lit side cropped out,
Right,
right?
yeah, you just see down here, you can see just a tiny little bit of the lit side. And then just in a few seconds here, it's going to go blink. Now, when it goes blink, what does that tell you about the moon?
No atmosphere.
Correct. So, like I said, just by watching this, I can say the moon doesn't have an atmosphere. And if I went into the video itself, I can pull out the exact frame to the millisecond when the star disappeared, which is the critical point when you want to time it, is when it disappears and when it comes out the other side. Unfortunately, the moon would set, there it goes. So the moon is set by the time it came out of the other side. But like I said, I can use a C star to take these type of images for these types of movies and actually get scientific data that I could send out if I want. Or it's just pretty cool to just watch it, because I was able to, like I said, I had the C star set up, taking this video, and I was watching through the telescope, and I didn't have to worry about timing it, because I could let the C star do all the work for me. So
So it kept the framing for you.
yeah,
Yeah.
it kept all, like I said, if I go back to the exact frame where that disappeared, I can actually pull out the timing from it, because it hooks onto your Wi-Fi, and it gets your exact location and you know, syncs up with the GPS. So it's got the time down to 2 milliseconds. But that's what I did. So now we can go have refreshments.
Well, one more. And I believe that's it in terms of PowerPoints. I believe Greg, is there anyone other than Greg? I think we got everybody.
Very quick,
Yeah.
very quick. Everybody's getting fanny fatigue. Well, okay. Trying to get back to the time right now.
Oh, hey, Rob, we probably need to get that little ribbon out of the way for him, because he might, I'm afraid,
Probably drag it up.
I'm just afraid I'm gonna end up stopping the presentation. Well,
Well,
unless you can sneak around it, Greg.
where did the? You just bring it up to the bottom.
What do you,
I'm trying to find, no, let's just do it the slow way. We'll just run the time forward here. Not that much. Go back. It's been in the news through the summer that this stop right there. Now, I just want to take off these patterns so we can find our way to find Corona Borealis, the T star that is a variable erupting variable star. And we've been watching that over the summer because it's about to come to its 80-year time of flaring again. Now, this is a 10th magnitude star. So when it flares, it might get to 2nd magnitude, possibly 3rd magnitude. But where to watch this is very easy to find. So we start here with this pattern that everybody knows, the Big Dipper. We follow the arc of the handle over here to the bright star Arcturus, which is at the bottom of the bottom of the OT is this little ice cream cone shape of a pattern here. We can come up from there to these two stars in the middle, and then there's a triangle top to the ice cream cone. And Arcturus is at the bottom of the ice cream cone. So that's a very bright star. This one up here is an eye catcher. The three top ones are not quite as bright, but the one from here up to here is another eye catcher that leads you to this little bowl shape, this C shape of Corona Borealis, the northern crown. C for crown, C for corona. But this is the spot we want to zoom in on. So if you just, for the sake of your patterns, there we are. We can star hop from the Big Dipper, follow the arc to Arcturus, come up the side of the ice cream cone to this bright star, and hop over here to this bright star in the crown. And this is, let's zoom in a little bit more on that so we can see. Binoculars, this is an easy area.
most 7X binoculars will cover this whole area of the crown. But star hopping from Arcturus would just come in almost straight up. And here are the two stars along the side of the ice cream cone, a bright one with a little one below, up and down pair. Over here to the right, there's a little side-by-side pair. Now you know where you are in your binocular. You just keep coming up a little more and heading to the left, and you'll hit easily on Alpha, sometimes called Gemma, as the bright star in the crown. So I'll zoom in on that. Now this area is in your binocular. Zoom in on that. Okay. Here's the crown. There's 7 stars in the crown. Alpha is an easy eye catcher. And you want to go to the left of that. We're heading for this star here, which is the number 6 in the circle. If we start counting clockwise from this end of the C shape, go over here to the number 6 star. This one is a little confusing. It's a dim star and it's bent way over, so you might get confused. Don't think you're at the 7th. If you're at this 6, be sure you're coming up here 3, 4, 5, 6. We want to get in on this star and center in on that, because that's going to be our angle to jump off from. A line from down here up to this one, we make a 90-degree left turn, and we come over here to this area. We won't see this in binoculars, but this is the zone you want to look at. It's almost a right triangle, 90 degrees off of this star. And this area here, it shows exactly, there it is, the blaze star. And that's where it will be. You're not going to see any of this in binoculars, but this is the position to look for. It's easy between these two and 90 degrees to the left. When it pops, it's going to be possibly, these are all 4th magnitude stars here. So it's going to be an obvious. These here are, it's going to be almost as bright as those. It might even possibly get up to 2nd magnitude with the Alpha star in the crown. So I just wanted to share that easy star hop so everybody can keep an eye on it. It's due.
Cool, thank you.
AVX, I push these charts. You can download these from the internet. This is the binocular chart, but they don't put the lines on there. So I printed a few with the lines on it. You can take if you want.
Sky Safari has the blaze star in the database.
It is in there, yes.
And there are refreshments, but let's give a final thanks to all of our speakers.
Our eclipse tonight, if you get through the clouds, maximum of this tiny little bite is going to be about 1044. There's a break in the clouds, tiny little bite. Total lunar eclipse in March will be much better than tonight. But the comet's coming too. And the comet. If you can learn to pronounce it. Yeah.